Hey, what's up? It's Coach AK, and this is Impact Today, where we highlight big people doing big things and how they're making an impact on the world. This show is sponsored by Empower to Play. Empower to Play is a NGO where they use sports diplomacy and youth development to make an impact on the world and identify leaders in impoverished communities. And today I'm super excited because we have a good friend of mine, James Venna. Now, today we're going to be talking about entrepreneurship. Now, the funny thing is entrepreneurship is a new thing that's really coming out that a lot of people are talking about. I'm not going to say it's necessarily a fad, but entrepreneurship has been around since the beginning for many centuries. And that started when you had individuals that needed something, a product, they needed to exchange goods, and somebody had something of value and exchanged it for another piece of value. So today we're going to be talking about entrepreneurship, and we have a great guy in here. His name is James Venna, coming out of New York City. Now, a little bit about him. He started over 12 different businesses around the world, sold 7 of them, and is currently right now the strategist and also works for Altus Partners. James Venna, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well, Coach AK. Good to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. So first and foremost, I know everybody hates this particular question, but who's James Venna?
Well, it's always a difficult question because now you're asking me to brag. And of course, I've got to find that sort of fine line between bloviate and articulation. But I think I'm a passionate, driven individual that, I don't know, I hate to say you were born to succeed, but I was born to never be afraid to fail on my venture to success. I had I've come from a blue collar family, actually from the streets of Brooklyn, clamorous streets of Brooklyn, as somebody once eloquently said, and went the typical route of trying to just be better than everybody else around me in the form of business and the form of wealth creation for myself. I just wanted to have some better things. And at a very young age, I really thought that I would have a skill set that would help me, I think, proceed with my life as far as adding value to my life and the people around it. I'm a passionate individual. I am extremely mission driven. I have never, ever looked at a problem without thinking that there was some sort of solution to that problem. And I did that at a very, very young age. As I matured through the business world in my younger career, my young career years, I was very, very fortunate to end up in a place that allowed me to do business globally. Not a whole lot of people, and this was back in 1982 when globalization was pretty much a foreign word. Entrepreneurship was really not a relevant word back in 1982 as far as what it means today, especially when you look at social media. So so the James Venna that you're asking who is and what I sort of became, I think being in a global stratosphere in business and being sort of the verbose articulator that I had become not only gave me the ability to be well cultured, but it also gave me some instincts or maybe allowed me to polish some instincts that allowed me to be the person that I wanted to develop to be. And so now that I look back on my life, I'm 56 years old now, so I've been basically in business for a really long time and have, as you said, started a lot of businesses and come to a lot of different conclusions in my life. I look back now and I think that the person that I was at 22 is not the person that I am at 56. So I think It would be a complete misnomer to think that, you don't actually progress in your life. But as I look back, I think that the things that I was at 22 have helped me accomplish where I am at 56.
Well, I know you had at 26, you did, I know something that you're really proud about and you've done some really good work there, was global trading. Was that at 26?
Well, actually, I started in the global trading business at 22, right out of school. Okay. I was really planning to go to Fordham Law School. I wanted to be a lawyer, and I had an opportunity to stay around a company that was in the global commodity trading business and they were focusing most of their attention into the ex-Soviet Union. And the founder of that company, who was a great visionary and probably my mentor, I say probably my mentor because I don't think he meant to be my mentor. I didn't sign up for a mentorship class from him, but he guided me throughout my career. That company gave me the opportunity to maybe pause my postgraduate career and end up in a commodity trading business, moving, I guess, some assets from the Soviet Union, the ex-Soviet Union, into China. Now, this was in 1982. So, China was truly the hinterlands in 1982. As a matter of fact, my first trips to China, I was in Beijing, and everybody, all the locals were still wearing Mao suits. It was a very different sort of society than it is today. And I pretty much lived in Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Beijing as a commodity trader, moving these assets and these trading assets to the People's Republic of China in the early 80s. And it was great. It was a great experience for me. It not only put me in a business that let me know immediately that I was not going back to law school, but it launched my career in business because in 1986, where you're referring to, I had decided after coming back to the United States and being involved in a pretty big deal within that company of trading. We were basically trading a lot of petrochemicals and synthetic, and that company decided to get involved in the cotton business, which was a natural fiber. It was a pretty successful journey, but I think my journey ended in '86 when I decided that it was probably the best time in my life at 26 years old to leave all of that behind and start my own business. And I didn't just start a business. I started it in the World Trade Center, and I grew that business to having 20 offices around the world by 2000. We had a very big business, and it was really my love, right? If you have to have a love, it was being able to do business with all these different cultures as a commodity trader, and all of that became sort of a stepping stone to doing other businesses, because obviously, I was a player in a lot of different markets. I have a lot of energy. So when opportunities would come, if I thought the opportunities were good enough to pursue for my company, I did. And that's how I think I actually structured myself into being a sort of global strategist, a business developer, but most importantly, sort of a wealth creator, job creator, and growth specialist. It really had nothing to do with commodity trade per se. 20 years later, just had to know, it was about knowing people in business that I thought that brought me to that point.
Well, you said it so relaxed. It's like I built a company that was global. Now, we have individuals that are just trying to have an idea, and they want to get that idea into something that is tangible in terms of entrepreneurship, a term that is being thrown around a lot. As we get into this, like, what do you define as entrepreneurship?
Okay, so it's an interesting question today, right? Because I never thought of myself as an entrepreneur as I was actually doing things. I was just mission driven, doing things. And my title was CEO, president, developer. It was never entrepreneur. This word became very prevalent. I'm going to say I think Steve Jobs made this term really relevant back when he was truly the entrepreneur who kind of walked away from a lot of the dogmas that entrepreneurs had. So the definition of entrepreneur seems to be evolving. But for me, for my own opinion, I hate to see the word thrown around as much as it's being thrown around, because entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs is almost like code speak for I haven't found myself, I don't have a job, and that's not being an entrepreneur. Being an entrepreneur means that you have to have this ability, and this is of course my opinion, but you have to have this ability to not only have a vision, but see the end result of that vision before anybody else can. That's truly, that's a definition, a textbook definition to me of an entrepreneur. And of course, you have to have the passion that goes along with being so mission driven that you see the end, and you might be a little frustrated that other people can't see it yet, but you really try hard to articulate it to them, knowing that, you're kind of breaking the mold. You're doing something entrepreneurial, and you're an entrepreneur doing that. And you're kind of creating this sort of new way of doing things, which is going to have its enemies, its cynics, its critics, its detractors. So the other thing that an entrepreneur really has to have is pretty thick skin, right? It's not that you've had a fear bypass at birth. It's not like you don't fear anything, because that would be pretty much stupidity. But it's having the ability to understand the fear, but never fear that you won't be able to overcome the last obstacle to kind of move it along. Or a true entrepreneur never had a fear bypass at birth. They just never feared whether they can and will sooner or later. And that's the whole thing about perseverance and actually getting things that would be, I guess, on some sort of successful mission. Remember, an entrepreneur always has to know that when they wake up in the morning, that their vision and their mission has to be sort of greater than themselves for both of them to be successful. The minute that somebody doesn't know if it could be successful or isn't teetering with it, then in my opinion, they're really just looking for a business. They're not that sort of inborn, dyed-in-the-wool entrepreneur.
So you're saying, you talked about the business piece there, but for the most part, you're talking about a mindset, a way of being. So today, the way we use entrepreneurship is, I'm starting a business. Terminology of an entrepreneur is, if you say, I'm starting a business, does that automatically make you an entrepreneur?
Well, first of all, doing something entrepreneurial does not make one automatically an entrepreneur. It doesn't make one an entrepreneur, doesn't make one not an entrepreneur. It's just that the rubber doesn't meet the road just because you've done something entrepreneurial. In very much the same way that if I, after this interview, decided to go out and shoot a couple of baskets or go to the batting range and hit a few baseballs, I wouldn't consider myself an athlete, right? I wouldn't consider myself a basketball player or a baseball player. If you went out tomorrow morning and said, I want to learn how to play the piano, you might decide to learn to play the piano, you play a few songs, but would you define yourself as a musician? Probably not. So entrepreneurs, we have to be very careful who we define as an entrepreneur, just as the same way that if you're doing something musical or sports-minded, that it doesn't automatically create the ability for you to call yourself, define yourself, label yourself as the pinnacle of that particular discipline, right? Because if you say you're a musician, you're pretty much the pinnacle in music. Same thing, if you go out and you start your own business, and it doesn't mean you're an entrepreneur. It only means that you're doing something entrepreneurial. The definition of entrepreneur will be defined by the people around you. If you're inspiring them, if you're motivating them, if your passion is just contagious, those people will define whether or not you're an entrepreneur.
Go to that story. Every entrepreneur will say, always started, even though the business may have started that day, they've always been their approach. So for you and the young James Venna, the child James Venna, was there an entrepreneurial journey in there? Was there stuff that you can say that you're doing entrepreneurial things or plans when you were younger?
Okay, that's an interesting question, right? Because that's kind of that whole sort of nature versus nurture thing. And can somebody be an entrepreneur if they don't have the tools? Could you be born to be an entrepreneur? Got to make it clear here. No one here is saying that doing something entrepreneurial automatically excludes you from being an entrepreneur. It just doesn't automatically make you an entrepreneur, right? So the young James Venna, as you described, I'll tell you about the young James Venna. Sore loser, hated to lose, passionate about everything I did, made sure that if I was going to the schoolyard to play basketball, that I would be such a good basketball player that when I got there, people wanted me on their team first. I'd be the first pick in a pickup game. I didn't get there because I was a great basketball player that I was born. I was born, though, with this desire to never be second rate, never to be second best. But I was never afraid to work hard at it. Of course, I was sort of blessed and cursed at the same time that my entire life I have been defined as an insomniac. Insomniacs what it means is that I don't get to sleep. That's the bad news. The good news is that it gives me the ability to make sure that I'm honing my skills to be the best that I could be. I could give you a quick story. In grade school, and I was in a fairly disciplined grade school, and I tell this story, and I know I told it to your people earlier. My parents went out to Las Vegas. The kids in my class had nothing to do. In grade school, people did things like pitch pennies or flip baseball cards, as a hobby. And I had decided that it would be kind of fun to start this sort of internal club within my grade school to do things. And of course, I was making money doing it, but it also made me really popular. And I've never been insecure, but I've always wanted to be the best at whatever I could be. And I got to tell you, from my children to my parents to my grandparents, every single one of them would probably define me as being driven, because that's who I was in my whole life. I was always driven. And I think it helped me succeed. But I think that the characteristic of being driven is one of the characteristics that you need to actually define yourself as an entrepreneur. Not driven for wealth, not driven for success, just the word driven. Just to say that whatever I do, I'm going to do it better than anybody else. And I think that that's what, I don't think that has changed from the time I was 4. I don't remember much before I was 4, until the time I was 56, even to this day, driven. Any business I've ever gotten into, I needed to get to sort of the top of the mountain. And I would fall down that mountain. I don't want anybody to misunderstand, to think that, this was all moonlights and canoes. There were pains, there were sleepless nights, all part of the process of finding your success. But I never ever feared that I would not be able to do it. And I had the drive, the perseverance, and the passion, and probably the support network with mentors and understanding family members to actually get to where I needed to get to.
Well, you talked about a lot of things. You talked about having the drive, having the passion, having mentors. What would you say out of all of those is the thing that's helped you succeed to where you are right now the most?
As I look back in my life, I've started to use these 2 words, and I put them together, and I mean this because it's very hard to define yourself. But I think the thing that I am most grateful for that I have been able to have is intellectual humility. And what that really means is that means that whether I was 4 or 22 or 56, I've had this ability to listen and to try to read things and people and try to understand maybe the nuances of how people think and how people go. And of course, it's helped me as a negotiator. It's helped me as maybe a public speaker and a motivator and an inspirator. I've been a very inspirational leader, but I was an inspirational leader, frankly, when I was on the schoolyard playing ball or, just sort of hanging out. I was the one that was kind of the leader. And I think that intellectual humility, and I didn't know it back then like I know it now, I think that has helped me. And what is intellectual humility? It's really knowing what you don't know and being open-minded enough to say, hey, I really want to know that. And even though that person that is standing over there isn't my friend, maybe my enemy, maybe not even in the same arena as I am, but if that person knows something that I don't know, I'm going to be like a sponge. And I'm going to learn about that person. I'm going to learn about their culture. I'm going to learn about why they say what they say, why they think what they think. And that, frankly, has helped me tremendously in my career.
So what would you say then, especially go back a little bit to the nature versus nurture. You know, let's say there's a kid or an adult that wants to start a business, but doesn't feel like he had any type of in their upbringing. Train an entrepreneur. Do you think someone that may not have entrepreneurial tendencies, you can train them to become one?
Okay, well, first of all, I'd like to differentiate between entrepreneurial tendencies and entrepreneurial skills, right? Because there's a difference between tendencies, because that kind of insinuates or infers, that it's something that they want to do, right? I mean, everybody at some age wants to be a rock star. Everybody at some age has the tendency to maybe want to be an artist. Like, we all have tendencies growing up when we're young. But some of the successes are really set aside for those who were born with a certain skill set that they could actually persevere and have the passion to pursue those tendencies throughout their entire life, not just through the tendency part. And that's where I think the skill comes in. I frankly think that, I like to compare everything to sports and music, because I think that sports and music transcends everything else that could be a lot of what we call noise, or static noise in business, right? Because, when you're looking at business, you're looking at the static of business, and everybody's trying to make a buck. There's always somebody out there that's trying to sell you a program so that you will be able to retire early. Of course, that always blows my mind, because the one thing I know is that the true entrepreneur, the one who's born with that skill and passion to motivate, inspire, have visions, the last thing that person's thinking about is early retirement. It's, it's a conflict of interest, right? So, and most of these people who like to write those sort of books, most of them, not all of them, really have never understood the life balance that an entrepreneur needs. And the life balance is really, really important, because if you haven't done it on your own, how could you understand how to get it done? So let's go back to the sports and music thing, because everybody sort of understands that. So in sports or music, since we all know that most children as we grow up aspire to be an athlete or a musician. At some point in their life, that's what you aspire to be. Well, we're not all born with that skill, right? It's kind of like the funnel effect. There's a lot of people going in, but not so many people coming out the other end. And, so what would be more disingenuous? Telling somebody who wants to be an athlete that hasn't a lick of athletic ability, would it be disingenuous to tell that person, don't worry, we could train you and you're going to be able to hit a curveball and play for the Yankees someday? Meanwhile, you sort of know that that's not going to happen. Getting to racehorses, I breed racehorses. I mean, the minute the horse gallops for the first time, you'll know immediately if you have a Triple Crown contender or somebody who's going to be a horse that's going to be rather common. Same thing with the musician, right? So when it comes to the nurturing versus nature, I think we all have to be very careful, especially with the young, that we don't try to sell them a bill of goods. So if you don't see the passion, if you don't see somebody who actually picks something up and just will continue to do it day in and day out until they get better at it, if they sort of walk away, frustrated, I don't think there's a program in the world that's going to reprogram that person to have that drive and desire that they're going to need. So maybe we'd all be better off telling people that are aspiring entrepreneurs whether or not we actually think that they have the skill set. Now, it doesn't mean that they can't do something entrepreneurial or be a great business leader. But I think it's a little disingenuous to think that you'd be able to mold them into having skills that they just weren't born with. Some people have more fear than others. Some people have a more athletic ability, an ear for music. It doesn't mean that they can't become a rock star. It doesn't mean that they can't become, they can't play sports somewhere. It only means that they're kind of going against the grain. And maybe we'd be a little bit better off if we defined entrepreneurs like we define athletes and musicians, where there has to be an inborn skill set to actually define that that's where the future needs to be.
Right. I mean, you say something interesting. If you actually told an entrepreneur you're not an entrepreneur, it wouldn't affect their decision. Show you who I am, and they're going to continue. It might even motivate them even more. If you tell somebody that may not have those qualities to say maybe this isn't for you and they quit, then maybe that's kind of a signal that maybe it may not be cut out for you.
Listen, I mean, that's a really eloquent way to put it, because I think that all the time. So when somebody asks me if they say, am I an entrepreneur? Do you think I could be an entrepreneur? And if I say no, and they start acting, very insecure about it with all the whys, and to be honest with you, they're really not entrepreneurs, right? Because it's sort of like, if you were really an entrepreneur, if I told you no, you would spend the rest of your life trying to prove me wrong. And if you did, I'd give you a big pat on the back and say, congratulations, not only did I misjudge you, but I probably, in a very small way, probably added the inspiration and motivation for you more than anybody else who I said was an entrepreneur.
Right. No, I mean, it was good. I mean, also early regarding these mentors. I know since I've gone on to this journey, whether somebody's actually said it or not, I've had someone helping me, guiding me on my path. I think at the very early stages, my father was really my first mentor when it all started. And I had all these little ideas, and he would be sitting with me and having these conversations with me. I don't think he ever said, hey, son, I'm your mentor, but I really took what he had to say to heart. Have you had any mentors? Have you had any individuals that have helped you in your path?
Well, it's really, that's always a very difficult question, because if you really want to cut it really close to the bone, it'd be hard to discount any teacher, your parents, clergy, whoever was in your life that you were listening to and that have actually tried to contribute to your well-being. In many ways, they're all part of your mentorship, right? So maybe they're not your business mentor per se, or your entrepreneur coach per se, but they all have given you sort of pause to think, or try to get you to think in a way that might have just been better than the way that you were thinking, even from a young child, a teacher. So they're all mentors. And if you have intellectual humility, which I think is important, I think that you would be remiss to discount them at the point of your life. Now, there will be some mentors that will be more important to you than others. Of course, you never know that until you're kind of looking backwards, right? So that's a really difficult thing. I've had lots of mentors, but I've had one in particular who taught me so many things in ways that I now have sort of adopted his way of teaching and his philosophy. And it wasn't about, adding two formulas together to come up with a solution. It was more about just the philosophy of yourself, your inner being, what it means to be a person of integrity, of humility, what it means to be arrogant, because sometimes you have to be arrogant in business. And, and what it means to be a leader. And so as a leader, as a business person, as a wealth generator, yes, I think I can say that one particular person helped me more than everybody else. But I would be remiss if I discounted all the other people who try to help me along the way. And I give them all a great deal of gratitude. Yeah,
and for me, it's been the same. I had a lot of individuals, and sometimes you don't realize where the advice can come from. I think the advice has to come from a certain person in a suit and a tie that's in a profession, but sometimes you can get business from a guy on the subway. You realize how it can change your thoughts. And you said something early, listening, right? Understanding that you're always getting advice that can possibly move your business, your mission, your thought process. How would you identify, or let's say you wanted to identify a particular person that you really look up to that says, hey, I really want help in this entrepreneurial journey, in this business. Do you have any strategies on how to identify or connect with a mentor? that may not already be established?
Well, yeah, first of all, I think that if you're a person out there and you have this sort of insatiable curiosity and you have this belief that you're an innovator and you're very creative and you have, oodles of passion and energy, maybe a little bit of arrogance to go with a bunch of intellectual humility, which means that, you really want to succeed, you're not going to let anything be an obstacle. Yeah, I think you should then at that point in your life, you should find somebody who could take those skills and turn them into sort of the ability to progress within the framework of that you're framing. So it's not just sort of the business discipline. If you want to be in the auto business, it's not an auto entrepreneur. It's basically an entrepreneur who can help you with all those things I mentioned: curiosity, innovation. And I think finding an entrepreneur, when people look back on their lives, they realize that their most significant entrepreneurs found them. Because if you're truly talented and you're truly doing what it is that a true entrepreneur does, and that is always out there. True entrepreneurs typically have a lot of charisma. They are articulators. They're not wallflowers. They're good listeners, but they're even better speakers, even at young ages, And people will kind of magnetically be attracted to that sort of a person as their leader. But leaders or business owners and finance people that want to sort of back someone's play, they will see that, they will take note, and they will find you and become sort of your mentor. Now, of course, you could buy mentorship, right? And when I say buy mentorship, I mean there's a lot of entrepreneur coaches and a lot of entrepreneur mentors out there. And I think that if one is truly has this desire, passion, lack of fear of whether or not they ultimately will and can, then they should find themselves a real good entrepreneur coach. And that entrepreneur coach is going to be a life coach. It's not going to be just a coach about business, because the one thing that people need to always keep in mind about the true dyed-in-the-wool entrepreneur is that they get on a path of a mission that will ultimately lead to success. When they get to that success, they will never stop creating and expanding. And an entrepreneur coach can actually help with sort of the life balance of how that works. It's this really fine line of, not wanting more because you want more material wealth. I've never met an entrepreneur, a true entrepreneur, that did what they did for material wealth. I think it was the residue of what they did. And as a matter of fact, I've always said this: if you seek wealth, you'll have a harder time finding it. If you just work hard, it will find you. And so you need to find that sort of coach to give you that life balance, because it's very, very difficult. And particularly for women. Women entrepreneurs face a completely different life balance situation than men entrepreneurs. And women entrepreneurs are making up a very large part of the sector right now, which tells me that they are really going to be the future job creators, venture generators, innovators, right? I mean, they're in a position right now, being women, that I think that the glass ceiling in a lot of places around the world, talk about globally now, is being broken. And they're out there and they're making their names known in the world of business. But for the women entrepreneur, not just the women business leader, she has a completely different set of life balance issues that she's going to face, not with failure, but with success. And a true entrepreneur coach should always be available not only to coach failures, because they're pretty easy to coach. It's not so easy to mentor or coach into success, because that's when life balances start to fall out of kilter. And people have to be very, very careful that they don't let the excess of their mission drive them out of their relationships.
A little bit more on that. What do you mean by expanding on the relationships? Can you expand on that just a little bit more? Like, what is, like, someone, I know some individuals that may have a fear of failure and also a fear of success. So what are some of those success situations that you've maybe seen that have been a challenge with the work life?
Right. Well, first of all, the true entrepreneur doesn't fear failure. Fears really, we all have fear. Everybody has fear. There's no such thing as a fear bypass. Now, some people will jump out of a plane, and they're kind of thrill seekers. An entrepreneur is kind of a thrill seeker. It doesn't mean they don't have fear or they're not, smart enough or intelligent enough to understand where the obstacles are. But they don't fear it, because if you're truly an entrepreneur, you feel like that failure becomes nothing more than sort of an adjunct to the future success that you're going to have as you're putting the pieces together in a puzzle. The fear of success is an interesting one, because it's kind of like the encore, right? You reach the pinnacle of your success in the vision that you created, right? I've always said that in order to be successful in a vision, you have to see the end of it. So you get to the end of that vision and you're really happy. The problem is that the true dyed-in-the-wool entrepreneur will continue to just make the bar higher. The bar will keep building higher and higher. So it's, what do I do for an encore? Not because the people around them are looking for an encore, but because the true entrepreneur has this passion to always be succeeding and progressing. Well, when it comes to life balance, and I'll give you from my own history. So, I started international business. I had young children. It was way before things like, cell phones and text messaging and, I'm okay and I'm here. And I traveled around the world, and I lived in a lot of different places and opened a lot of different offices while my wife was raising our children. And every time I had come back and I was somewhat successful, I had to realize I had to have somebody tell me, and I had a lot of, being a young guy in the business helped me, because a lot of older people helped me through this. And they would always say to me, hey, kid, you're on a roll, but take a couple of months off and take your family on nice vacations and do this kind of life balance thing before you kind of go on to the next level. And a lot of us, will do that begrudgingly, because you don't want to lose what you already have, but you also don't want to stop creating. And I will tell you, at 44 years old, I pretty much retired because my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer. And a lot of people know that story about me. And, I thought to myself, well, this was going to be my time to just stop and become sort of the parent that my kids deserved. And I did that. And by the time 2008, 2009 rolled around and business changed tremendously, my wife actually started to recover, and things were starting to get a little brighter around here. And it was 5 long years. But what I did is, when at 49, which was in 2009, I recognized the fact that I did that part of my job. What allowed me to do that was all the work that I put into it prior. So I took a lot of my experience and maybe wealth creation to kind of give back to my family. But by the time everything was ready to go, I didn't rest on my laurels. I started 5 companies since then. I created companies that have really, kind of gotten off the starting blocks and did really well. The only thing that I've learned this time around was I learned a little bit more about myself and sort of that life balance of what I needed for me, but I needed to make sure that remember I said before, to be successful, you have to make the mission as important as yourself. Well, when you have life balances to balance at home, that mission can't be secondary. That has to be your primary mission. And so, so it was kind of an interesting dynamic. But when I came back to the business and started these other companies, and as and have been here with you, of course, as we have decidedly within my family structure that this is who I am. I can't slow down, because I was born to be an entrepreneur.
Right. We talk a lot about the sacrifices, the hard work, the passion, a lot of things that we have to do to become these sacrifices. Why do it?
Well, I mean, I think why do it is because I don't think that true entrepreneurs, frankly, have a choice. You know, it's like this inborn, you know, I mean, it would really be taking a fish out of water, right? I mean, so why do it? Because that's who you are, because you go through life once, at least I think you do. And you might as well, if you have this burning desire to accomplish things, to innovate, to create, to lead, then you might as well accomplish things and innovate and create and lead, because you're not going to have a second chance. And I think the true entrepreneur doesn't really look at, you know, what could be coming down the road. It's like, you know, what it is going to make me happy today. And again, let's get back to sports and let's get back to music for a minute, where maybe your audience will understand sort of the definition of that. So everybody knows how difficult it is to be an actress, a musician. You see people playing for nickels in Penn Station every day. Why do it? Why does the actress get a waitress job or a waiter's job and bus table just so that they can continue to try to aspire to be an actress? Why do they do it? Because it's an inner burning feeling. And let's put it this way. If they didn't do it, they would never get to their goal, right? You can never achieve your goals if you don't try. So to have that inborn desire to be the baseball player, to be the musician or the rock star, and to have it and take it to the point, you know, take it to the limit, to the point where you're going to do it and you're going to never stop wanting to do it. That's where I think that being the entrepreneur coach or mentor that says, hey, I think you've got some good ideas, but I'm not really sure that this is for you because your perseverance or your energy or articulation level is going to get in your way someday. And, you know, some people are just not comfortable with that. And so I think that the why do it, I don't think that most of us who were born to do it have any choice.
Right. I mean, I actually, when I get answers to that question, because I do in the same industry, is I actually don't understand why everybody doesn't do it. The sense of freedom where you have an idea and the passion to believe, and I think the mindset's really important, is you believe the impact that. So for me, it's actually more shocking when somebody says they don't want to do it or they're not interested in doing it. I no longer push people into it because I think that's a decision you have to make on your own. But once you do that, I believe the freedom, the opportunity, the just personal development to understand that you have an idea and you can create something is just very, very addicting. So great. So out of all of the work that you've done, I mean, the 11, 12 companies, the new ventures that you are, I'm excited to hear about that. I think is going to be coming soon. It's really going to be impactful. Out of everything you've done, what are you the most proud of?
Wow. I raised two great kids. So I think it would be very difficult for me to put anything in front of that, especially since I sort of raised them both for a point in my life. However, I would say relative to career and business, you know, there's a couple of things that I was afforded to do that make me very proud. I was very proud, by the way, when I had gotten into the business of horse racing, and, you know, not as a gambler, but as a breeder, and because it was my father's passion. It's something my father wanted to do. So I was able to get him a stable of horses so that, you know, that we could do something together, right? Because the one thing about being an entrepreneur from a very young age, you know, I had mentioned before, from 22 to 25, I really wasn't in the country a whole lot. I started my own company at 26 and ended up getting married at 27. So the great relationship that I had with my own parents, who were pretty good mentors, you know, was not decaying. It just was becoming non-existent. When I was afforded the opportunity to get into the business of the horse racing, and me and my dad actually ended up on that, you know, the Triple Crown watch, and I did interviews on ESPN Wide World of Sports with Jim McKay. That was a pretty proud moment because it was a moment, hey, Dad, look at me. So that was really proud. But as I look back right now, I think the thing that I am most grateful to have right now is the ability to give back. I think that being able to give back is actually part of the wealth process. You know, it's not always the house and the fancy car and the racehorses and just building other dynamic businesses, but maybe the ability to sort of have this legacy of taking people and empowering them. And I know you're empowered to play. So sort of a play on words there. But being able to give back, not just financially, because it's very easy to write a check. You know, writing a check is a lot easier than trying to change somebody's life. But if you could do both, it's great. But if you could just take one person a week and inspire them and motivate them and know that maybe 20 years from now, that they'll be creating jobs and they'll become leaders in their own particular fields and communities. No one will remember me for that, but I'll be proud that it'll be part of my legacy.
And you kind of touched on usually the final question that we ask on Impact today, and is you kind of touched on it, and that is on this show. What we really want to do is, James Venna, you've had a tremendous work that you've done so far, and you still have a lot of years to do a lot more great things. So I'm super excited for you to be on the show. Really blessed to have you on the show. The question that we always ask everybody is, how do you feel impact on the world to make it a better place?
You know, interesting, AK. Today I had somebody make a comment on one of my LinkedIn profile of mine, and it was based on the recommendations that I had received. And I really have not read through the recommendations that people have given me on LinkedIn. And there was a common thread. There was about 40 of them there. And 35 of the 40 said that I was intelligent, great, feels great that people think that. But the common thread was they all thought that I was inspirational, motivational, and career changing. And I looked at these people's profiles, because I obviously know them, and I realized how long I have known some of them for 25 years, and where their careers have gotten.
Right.
And to think that they credit me as part of their motivational, inspirational, waking up in the morning, and how they wanted to go after career. Not as I was not their mentor at all, but they thought I was inspirational. So, yeah, I mean, I think I have impacted enough lives in the past, sort of unintentionally. Now I would like to intentionally impact even more lives and communities, because I guess you want to leave a legacy. We all want to leave a legacy. We all want to be remembered. You know, my mentor was remembered because he was Eleanor Roosevelt's chief advisor. He was the founder of the Ethical Culture Society. He was the founder for a committee for an effective Congress. And that is all great accolades to be. For my mentor, I say, better to be lucky than be good. But the one thing that I will always remember most about him was not that he was a kind and gentle man. He was. But he was so open-minded and so had this unbelievable, uncanny ability to make everybody around him feel important. And because he was able to do that, people actually felt important and then tried to do important things. It was a life-changing experience for me. And now that I look back, because, you know, of course, I've put in a lot of years of creating and doing and executing, and now I'm sort of becoming a bit of a teacher and a mentor. I would like to know that people one day will say, James Venna impacted me because, and I don't really care what the because part is, as long as they say I impacted them, of course, for the better. But then I know that I have left something behind even greater than a nominal charitable donation. And I think that every life I change and every life we have an impact on will be sort of, I told a person who told 2 people, who told 4 people. You don't know where that's going to end up. Because I am sure that in 1982 and 83, my mentor, who may he rest in peace, has been dead for 20 years, I am sure that he would have never dreamed that I would be sitting here thanking him for having the ability to inspire those 40 people that are just on LinkedIn alone. So I think that that's a great way to go about your life, to know that you can make an impact and you just do it.
100% agree. And the term we're talking about a lot is, and the ripple upon the ripple effect of that one decision or that one relationship that you had, over 20 years ago is now causing that ripple effect to the 40 people that you had. And you never realize how much that, once again, James, I just want to thank you so much for being on the show on Impact Today, where we highlight big people doing big things. First, we were talking really about entrepreneurship. And to me, it's about this mindset, this drive, and really about getting outside of your own head and realize that maybe all of us in this world. James, you continually doing great work. I thank you for the work that you do. And until next time, I can't wait to follow you on your process, for everybody else to follow you on the process. And if you want to hear more about James's story, you can actually check out impacttodaylive.com, and you can see his further story. Check him out on LinkedIn at James Venna. But James, how can people find more information about some of the work that you're doing?
Well, I think, in this world of social media, obviously LinkedIn is probably the place for them to go. I've got some pretty cool blogs on there. But look for me on LinkedIn, contact me, and I'm always willing to help. I like to think that my hand is always out in friendship and never in want.
Great. Well, that's it today. My name is Coach AK, the founder and president of Empowered to Play, where we do sports diplomacy and youth development. On our next show, we have Jody Tatiana Charles, who's going to be talking about personal branding, right? You want to be an entrepreneur, you want to make an impact, you first have to understand who you are. But until next time, today we're talking about entrepreneurship. Until next time.
Thank you.